When Ariana Grande was cast as Glinda in the Wicked movie adaptation, fans celebrated. The role seemed perfect. A powerhouse vocalist playing one of musical theater's most iconic characters. But the set assistant who worked on the production for 8 months saw something that made her question everything. Ariana didn't just play Glinda. She became her. And the transformation wasn't just professional dedication. It was something deeper. Something consuming. Something that blurred the line between performance and possession. This is what happened on the Wicked set. And once you understand the extent of the transformation, you'll see Ariana's recent public appearances in a completely different light. The set assistant had worked on major film productions before. She'd seen actors commit to roles, lose weight for parts, change their accents, stay in character between takes. Method acting was nothing new. But what Ariana Grande did during Wicked was beyond method. It was metamorphosis. The assistant first met Ariana during pre-production in London, early 2023. Ariana arrived looking like herself. Long ponytail, tan skin, signature cat eye makeup. But within weeks, the changes began. First, the hair. Ariana bleached it platinum blonde. Not just for the role, but permanently. She stopped wearing the ponytail entirely. Started styling it exactly like Glinda. Soft curls, pink ribbons, ethereal and delicate. The assistant thought it was commitment to the character. But then Ariana never changed it back. Even off set. Even on weekends. Even months after filming wrapped. Then came the weight loss. Ariana had always been petite, but during Wicked production, she became alarmingly thin. Her face changed shape. Cheekbones became more pronounced. Her frame looked fragile, almost childlike. When the assistant expressed concern, other crew members brushed it off. She's just getting into character. Glinda is supposed to be light and airy. But the assistant noticed that Ariana stopped eating regular meals. She'd have small portions, mostly vegetables, sometimes just liquids. And she'd exercise obsessively between takes. Running, Pilates, dance rehearsals that went hours longer than required. The voice changed too. Ariana started speaking in a higher register. Softer, more breathless. Exactly like Glinda. At first, it was only when cameras were rolling. But soon, it bled into her everyday speech. During breaks. During interviews. During casual conversations with crew. The assistant heard Ariana on the phone with her team one day. And even then, the voice was Glinda's. High. Sweet. Almost childlike. It was unsettling. Like Ariana's natural voice had been replaced. But the most disturbing change was the personality shift. Ariana had always been known as friendly but guarded. Professional. Focused. But during Wicked, she became someone else entirely. Overly cheerful. Constantly smiling. Laughing at things that weren't funny. Giggling during serious production meetings. The assistant watched as Ariana's co-stars would exchange glances, confused by the behavior. One actor privately told the assistant, "It's like she's performing all the time, even when no one's watching." The assistant started noticing other things. Ariana would stay in costume longer than necessary. Sometimes she'd wear Glinda's dress during lunch breaks. She'd keep the jewelry on between scenes. She started requesting that crew members call her Glinda instead of Ariana. At first, people thought it was a joke. But she was serious. Insisted on it. And if someone called her Ariana, she'd correct them. Politely. But firmly. "It's Glinda, actually." Then there was the isolation. Ariana had arrived on set with a team. Manager. Publicist. Assistants. Friends visiting from LA. But slowly, they all disappeared. One by one, The assistant heard rumors that Ariana had distanced herself from everyone, stopped responding to calls, stopped seeing friends. Her only companion was her Wicked co-star, Cynthia Erivo, who played Elphaba. The two became inseparable. But even that relationship seemed intense, codependent, like they were living inside the world of Ounce and couldn't separate from it. The assistant tried to talk to Ariana once, asked how she was doing, if she was taking care of herself. Ariana smiled, that same bright, unsettling smile, and said, "I've never been better. I've finally found who I'm supposed to be." The phrasing stuck with the assistant. Not "I'm playing a great character." Not "this role is amazing." But "I've found who I'm supposed to be." Like Glinda wasn't a role. It was a revelation. An identity replacement. The production wrapped in mid-2023. The assistant assumed Ariana would return to normal. Go back to brunette. Gain back the weight. Drop the voice. But she didn't. Months passed. Ariana did interviews, red carpets, public appearances, and she was still Glinda. The blonde hair, the thin frame, the high voice, the pink dresses, the childlike mannerisms. Fans started noticing. Social media exploded with comments. Why does Ariana look so different? Is she okay? This doesn't seem healthy. Ariana's team released statements. She's just happy. She's thriving. This is who she's always wanted to be. But the assistant knew better. She'd watched the transformation happen in real time. And it wasn't happiness. It was consumption. Ariana hadn't become Glinda. Glinda had consumed Ariana. And the person the public was seeing now wasn't the woman who'd arrived on set 2 years ago. It was someone else. Something else. The assistant started researching method acting gone wrong. Actors who'd lost themselves in roles. Heath Ledger's Joker. Jared Leto's obsessive transformations. Daniel Day-Lewis disappearing into characters for months. But those actors eventually came back. They finished filming and returned to themselves. Ariana hadn't. Even a year after production wrapped, she was still performing Glinda. Still living as her. Still speaking like her. It was no longer a role. It was reality. Then the assistant discovered something that made her blood run cold. Wicked, the musical, is based on a story about transformation. About becoming someone you're not. About magic and identity and the cost of ambition. And Glinda, the character, is someone who performs. Who wears a mask. Who hides her true self behind beauty and charm and superficiality. What if Ariana hadn't just played Glinda? What if she'd internalized the character's essence? Become a living embodiment of the mask? The assistant began documenting everything. Every strange occurrence. Every personality shift. Every moment that felt wrong. She started with the physical changes. During the first month of production, Ariana's appearance altered weekly. Her cheeks hollowed. Her arms became thinner. Her collarbone protruded. Costume designers had to constantly alter her Glinda dresses because they kept getting looser. The assistant overheard a fitting session where the designer expressed concern. Ariana just laughed it off in that new high voice and said, "Glinda needs to float. I need to be light enough to float." But it wasn't just about looking like Glinda. The assistant noticed Ariana adopting the character's mannerisms with unsettling precision. Glinda, in the musical and story, has specific gestures. The way she waves. The tilt of her head. The hand-on-hip pose. The graceful turns. Ariana began doing these unconsciously. During production meetings. Walking to her trailer. Sitting in the makeup chair. The movements were automatic. Programmed. Like muscle memory that had overwritten her natural body language. The crew started talking. Quietly. In whispers during lunch breaks. Have you noticed how different she is? She doesn't eat anymore. She only answers to Glinda now. But no one said anything officially. No one reported concerns to producers. Because in Hollywood, transformation is celebrated. Commitment is rewarded. And questioning an actor's process is career suicide. So everyone watched. Everyone noticed. But everyone stayed silent. The assistant tried to find moments when Ariana would drop the character. She'd observe her between takes. During bathroom breaks. In the parking lot. Waiting for her to relax. To be herself. But it never happened. Ariana was always performing. Always Glinda. Even when she thought no one was watching. The assistant saw her once, sitting alone in her trailer during a long break. The door was slightly open. Ariana was staring at herself in the mirror, practicing smiles, adjusting her posture, whispering dialogue to herself. And then, for just a moment, her face fell. The smile dropped. Her shoulders slumped. She looked exhausted, broken. But then she straightened, smiled again, and the mask was back. That moment haunted the assistant, because it proved that somewhere inside, Ariana knew. She was aware of what was happening, aware that she was losing herself. But instead of stopping, instead of pulling back, she recommitted. She chose Glinda. Or maybe by that point, she couldn't choose anymore. Maybe the character had already taken over, and that brief moment of awareness was the last flicker of the real Ariana before she disappeared completely. The assistant also noticed how Ariana's relationships changed. In the beginning, she'd video call her family. Her brother Frankie would visit set. Her mother would FaceTime during breaks. But gradually, those connections faded. Phone calls became shorter. Visits stopped. The assistant heard through the crew grapevine that Ariana's family was concerned. That they tried to visit but were told she was too busy. Too focused. That she'd talk to them after filming wrapped. But filming wrapped months ago. And Ariana still hadn't reconnected. Still kept them at a distance. Because they knew the real her. And the real her didn't exist anymore. The only relationship that intensified was with Cynthia Erivo, her co-star playing Elphaba. The two became inseparable in a way that went beyond typical co-star bonding. They finished each other's sentences, mirrored each other's movements, spoke in a private language of inside jokes and references. On the surface, it looked like friendship. But the assistant saw something else. Codependency. Two people so deep in their characters that they could only relate to each other through the lens of Wicked. They weren't Ariana and Cynthia hanging out. They were Glinda and Elphaba living out a fantasy that never ended. The assistant witnessed several moments that crystallized how far gone Ariana was. One day, a visitor came to set. Someone from Ariana's management team who hadn't seen her in months. When they met, the visitor's face went pale. They pulled the assistant aside later and whispered, "What happened to her? She doesn't look like herself. She doesn't sound like herself. Is she okay?" The assistant didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was too complicated. Too disturbing. How do you explain that someone voluntarily erased themselves and replaced their identity with a fictional character? There was also the incident with the music. Ariana had always been known for her runs, her vocal acrobatics, the signature riffs that made her songs recognizable. But during Wicked, she stopped doing them. Started singing everything with Glinda's operatic, theatrical style. Light, airy, breathy. During a recording session for the film soundtrack, the music director asked Ariana to add one of her signature runs to a song. She looked confused. Said, "That's not how Glinda would sing it." The director tried to explain that it was still her voice. She could interpret it however she wanted. But Ariana refused. Insisted that Glinda wouldn't do runs. Wouldn't show off. Would keep it pure and simple. The director eventually gave up. Let her sing it her way. The Glinda way. The assistant started researching the psychology of method acting. She learned about actors who'd experienced dissociative episodes, who'd struggled to separate from characters. Christian Bale after The Machinist. Natalie Portman after Black Swan. But those were temporary. Those actors talked about the struggle, sought help, came back to themselves. Ariana wasn't talking about a struggle, wasn't seeking help, wasn't coming back. She was celebrating the transformation, posting about it on social media, calling it the role of a lifetime. Finding herself, becoming who she was meant to be. The assistant found interviews Ariana had done during production. Journalists would ask about the character, about the preparation, and Ariana would say things that sounded rehearsed, scripted. Glinda taught me so much about myself. Playing her made me realize I'd been hiding. She's not a character to me. She's a mirror. The words were pretty, poetic, but they were also alarming. Because mirrors reflect. They don't replace. But for Ariana, Glinda hadn't reflected anything. She'd consumed everything. The breaking point for the assistant came during the final week of filming. There was a wrap party. Cast and crew celebrating the end of a long, intense production. Everyone was relaxed. Drinking. Laughing. Out of character. Except Ariana. She arrived in a pink dress. Hair in Glinda curls. Makeup perfect. And she stayed in character the entire night. Spoke in the high voice. Made Glinda jokes. Posed for photos with the same tilted head and hand gestures. Other cast members tried to break through. Tried to have real conversations. But Ariana just giggled and deflected. And when someone asked, "When are you going to stop being Glinda?" she looked genuinely confused. Like she didn't understand the question. Like the concept of stopping didn't make sense. The assistant left the party early. Went home. And cried. Because she realized she'd witnessed something tragic. Not dramatic. Not sensational. Just quietly, devastatingly tragic. She'd watched a person disappear. Watched them choose a character over themselves. And no one had stopped it. No one had intervened. Because in an industry that values transformation above all else, Ariana's total immersion was seen as dedication. As artistry. As Oscar-worthy commitment. After filming wrapped, the assistant tried to distance herself. Took other jobs. Worked on other projects. But she couldn't stop following Ariana's public appearances. Couldn't stop analyzing every interview. Every red carpet. Every social media post. Looking for signs that the real Ariana was still in there. That she'd eventually come back. But months passed. Then a year. And Ariana remained Glinda. The blonde hair never changed. The thin frame never filled out. The high voice never dropped. The childlike mannerisms never stopped. The assistant started noticing patterns in Ariana's interviews. Journalists would ask about her life, her music, her future plans, and Ariana would redirect everything back to Wicked, back to Glinda, back to the transformation. She'd say things like, "I can't imagine my life before this role. Everything before Wicked feels like a different person. I finally know who I am." And the interviewers would nod, write it down, frame it as beautiful, as an artist finding herself. But the assistant heard something else. She heard erasure. She heard someone who'd lost touch with their own history, their own identity, their own self. The most disturbing development came when Ariana started distancing herself from her own music, her pop career, the songs that made her famous. In interviews, she'd refer to her old work with detachment. That was a different era. I was playing a character back then too. I'm more authentic now. But the assistant wondered, was she more authentic? Or had she just replaced one performance with another? At least when Ariana was a pop star, she could take off the costume at the end of the day. Could be herself in private. But with Glinda, there was no off switch. No private self. Just the character. All the time. Forever. The assistant also tracked what happened to Ariana's voice. Not just the pitch, but the accent. Ariana had grown up in Florida. Had a slight American accent. But after Wicked, she started speaking with a transatlantic accent. That old Hollywood, theater-trained sound. The accent Glinda uses. The accent that doesn't really exist in nature. It was completely affected. Completely learned. And it became so ingrained that Ariana used it everywhere. In casual conversations. In voice memos. In videos with friends. She'd even slip into it during moments of stress or surprise, which suggested it wasn't conscious anymore. It had become her default. Friends from Ariana's past started speaking out. Not publicly, but in private conversations that leaked online. Former backup dancers. Old collaborators. People who'd known her for years. They all said variations of the same thing. I don't recognize her anymore. She won't talk about anything except Wicked. It's like she's been replaced. One former friend said something particularly chilling. I tried to bring up memories from before the movie. Things we did together. Inside jokes. And she looked at me like I was talking about a stranger. Like those memories belonged to someone else. The assistant began connecting this to a larger pattern in Hollywood. How often do we see actors completely transform for roles and never quite come back? How many times have we watched someone lose themselves in a character and everyone applauds it as dedication? Matthew McConaughey after Dallas Buyers Club. Charlize Theron after Monster. These transformations are celebrated. Rewarded with Oscars. Praised as the pinnacle of acting. But what about the psychological cost? What about the identity damage? What about the person who existed before the role? The assistant researched Glinda as a character more deeply. And she found something that made her stomach turn. In the Wicked story, Glinda is not who she appears to be. She's performing goodness. Performing perfection. Hiding her insecurity and jealousy behind a facade of bubbles and sparkles. She's fundamentally inauthentic. She's a character defined by her mask. And Ariana had absorbed that completely. Had become a person defined by performance. By presenting an image. By hiding whatever real feelings or struggles existed beneath layers of pink and blonde and breathless giggles. What made it even more disturbing was that Ariana seemed happy. In every interview, every appearance, every social media post, she radiated joy. Smiled constantly. Laughed easily. Talked about how fulfilled she was. But the assistant had seen enough to know that the smile was Glinda's smile. The laugh was Glinda's laugh. The joy was Glinda's joy. And she wondered, what did Ariana feel? Did Ariana even exist anymore to feel anything? Or had the character become so dominant that Ariana's emotions, Ariana's desires, Ariana's authentic self had been completely suppressed? The assistant found herself becoming obsessed. She'd scroll through old photos of Ariana from 2018, 2019, 2020. Before Wicked. When her hair was brown. When her face was fuller. When she smiled with her whole face instead of just her mouth. When she spoke in her natural register. When she seemed like a complete person instead of a character. And she'd compare those photos to recent ones. The difference was staggering. It wasn't just physical. It was energetic. The old Ariana had presence. Groundedness. Reality. The new Ariana looked like a porcelain doll. Beautiful. delicate, but hollow. The assistant tried once more to reach out. She wrote a long message, explained her concerns, offered support, said she wasn't judging, just worried. She sent it through every channel she could think of: email, social media, mutual contacts. And she got one response. Not from Ariana. From Ariana's team. A polite but firm message. Ariana is thriving. She's never been happier or healthier. Your concerns, while appreciated, are unfounded. Please respect her privacy and her artistic journey. The word artistic journey stuck with the assistant, because it revealed how the industry frames this. Not as a mental health crisis, not as an identity dissolution, but as an artistic journey, as evolution, as growth. And anyone who questions it is dismissed as not understanding the creative process, as being too literal, too concerned, too unwilling to accept that sometimes artists have to destroy themselves to create something beautiful. But the assistant couldn't accept that, because she'd seen the destruction. She'd watched it happen in real time. And she knows that what the public sees, the stunning performance, the award-worthy transformation, the beautiful Glinda, came at a cost. The cost was Ariana Grande. The person, the woman who existed before the role, who had dreams beyond Wicked, who had an identity beyond a character. That person is gone. And everyone is celebrating the disappearance like it's a triumph. The Wicked movie will premiere. Critics will rave. Audiences will cry. Ariana will likely be nominated for awards. And she'll accept them as Glinda. She'll give speeches in the high voice. She'll wear pink. She'll thank everyone for believing in her transformation. And the world will applaud. We'll celebrate. We'll call it the performance of a generation. And maybe it is. But the assistant knows the truth. It's not a performance anymore. It's a replacement. It's what happens when method acting goes too far. When an actor doesn't just embody a character but erases themselves entirely. When the role doesn't end because the person playing it no longer exists. The assistant is speaking now not to condemn Ariana. Not to shame her choices, but to warn others. To make people understand that transformation has limits. That losing yourself isn't the same as finding yourself. That sometimes what looks like artistic dedication is actually psychological dissolution. And that the industry that celebrates this, that rewards it, that builds careers on it, is complicit in the destruction of the people who give everything for art. She wants people to look at Ariana and see not just a talented actress playing a role, but a human being who may have paid too high a price for perfection, who may be trapped inside a character she can no longer escape, who may wake up one day and wonder who she is, only to realize she's become someone else entirely. And she hopes that by sharing this story, someone, somewhere, will think twice before losing themselves completely. Will remember that characters are meant to be played, not lived. That roles are meant to end. And that the person beneath the costume deserves to exist too. The assistant also learned about the history of the Wicked role. Every actress who'd played Glinda on stage had talked about how demanding it was. How it required them to suppress parts of themselves. To perform femininity in an exaggerated way. To be constantly on. And many of them had spoken about struggling to separate from the character after long runs. But Ariana took it further. She wasn't just playing Glinda for 2 hours a night. She was living as Glinda 24/7. And there was no separation. No boundary. No off switch.